Before we begin, thank you for being here. If you love real-life stories filled with strength, truth, and unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure you subscribe, tap the like button, and drop your city or country in the comments. I always love seeing where my listeners are joining from.
Now, settle in.
This is a story about discovery, dignity, and a woman who reclaimed her life when everyone least expected it. Enjoy the story. The morning I turned 71, the air smelled of warm cinnamon bread and the hibiscus flowers I'd planted beside the back steps. I rose before sunrise, the way I always did, without any alarm or reminder. Dawn had barely brushed the tops of the old live oaks outside my window, and thin gold stripes stretched across the wooden floor of my screened-in patio. Quiet mornings like this always felt like borrowed time, soft, untouched, sacred. You can almost hear the earth breathe before the world wakes up and demands something from you. I carried my cup of Kenyan coffee to the long cedar table my husband built for me decades ago. I traced the grain with my fingers, remembering the years when I thought this house, this little retreat outside Charleston, South Carolina, was my consolation prize. A substitute for the dream life I'd once imagined. Back then, I had been a rising designer, a young woman with a mind full of blueprints and sketches. I'd been chosen to lead the development of a cultural art center that would have become the city's pride. I remember the smell of fresh drafting paper, the way the graphite pencil glided when I drew the first mock-ups. I had never felt more alive, more certain of my purpose. And then came Maurice. He'd had a brilliant idea, at least that's what he called it. A new custom metal crafting business he swore would make us wealthy within 2 years. We didn't have the capital. I did. I made the choice no one told me to make. I sold my inheritance, every cent my grandmother left me for my future. All of it went into the dream Maurice wanted more than he wanted my own. The business collapsed in 9 months. The debt, however, stayed. So instead of designing concert halls and public architecture, I built this house with whatever remained of my ambition. Every path in the garden, every archway and beam inside these walls, my hands were in all of it. This became my masterpiece, though no one else ever saw it that way. Just as I began clearing my thoughts, a voice cut through the quiet. "Riva, have you seen my white shirt? The one that makes me look sharp?" Maurice stood in the doorway, already dressed in pressed slacks, frowning like the world owed him a perfect morning. Not a word about my birthday. Not a glance at the sunflower-patterned linen I'd laid out last night. 71 years of living, nearly 49 of them married, and today was just another ordinary morning for him. "In your top drawer," I replied, not turning around. "I steamed it last night." He walked away without a thank you. He had long stopped noticing the things I did. To him, I was part of the home's foundation, steady, useful, invisible. He used to say, "You keep us grounded, Riva." He never understood how right he was. My phone buzzed. It was my eldest daughter, Talia.
"Morning, Ma."
"Happy birthday." "We're stuck in traffic on the interstate," she said, sounding irritated. "Can you start setting out the food? And keep an eye on Daddy, so he doesn't drink too much before we get there."
I swallowed a sigh. "Of course, baby. Everything will be ready." I hung up, feeling no sting. The sting had faded years ago, replaced by something quieter, a thin, ghost-like emptiness, the kind that settles in after too many disappointments. By late afternoon, the house brimmed with guests, neighbors, church friends, Morris's colleagues. Everyone brought flowers and warm wishes. I smiled, served sweet lemonade, passed around shrimp croquettes, and played the gracious hostess I had trained myself to be. Maurice thrived in moments like these. He strutted across the lawn, shaking hands, exaggerating stories, praising his own accomplishments. He'd say, "My home, my land," as if he built it brick by brick. Not one person knew that the title, the condo in Mount Pleasant, and our entire savings were in my name, my father's insistence, something I had never questioned. Then came my younger daughter, Serena, the only one who hugged me, as if she meant it. "Mom, you okay?" she whispered. "I'm just fine," I told her.
And for the first time in a long time, I meant it more than she knew. As dusk began falling and guests settled in the yard, Maurice tapped a champagne glass with a fork. The chatter quieted. He stood tall, dramatic, his silver hair catching the fading light. "Family and friends," he began, pausing as if preparing for applause. "Today we honor my beautiful Riva, the backbone of our lives." A murmur of approval echoed. "But tonight," he continued, "I want to be honest with all of you. Truly honest." Serena stiffened beside me. I felt the air shift. For more than 28 years, I've carried another responsibility, another love. He gestured toward the gate. A woman stepped forward, mid-50s, well-styled, confident in a way that made the skin of my neck prickle. Behind her stood a young man and young woman, both in their 20s, unsure whether to be ashamed or proud. Maurice wrapped his arm around the woman. "This," he announced, "is Marshall. And these are our children, Braylon and Mireia. My second family." Gasps rolled through the crowd. Talia froze mid-sip. Serena grabbed my hand, so tightly my fingers tingled. I didn't faint. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I felt something else, a quiet, complete internal shift, as if an old heavy door inside me had finally shut for good. Maurice looked proud of himself, waiting for my meltdown. But he didn't know the truth. I had found out about them a year ago, and I had prepared. I walked, calmly, purposefully, to the small patio table where a package wrapped in deep emerald paper sat waiting. I picked it up and returned to him. "I knew," I said softly. "And this gift is for you." Maurice blinked at the box in my hands, thrown off balance. This wasn't the scene he rehearsed in his mind. He thought he'd break me open like a fragile vase in front of an audience. He didn't expect quiet. He didn't expect calm. He certainly didn't expect preparation. He took the box with a stiff, reluctant smile. His fingers brushed mine, warm, trembling slightly, and I stepped back. He untied the satin ribbon. The emerald bough slipped to the grass like a fallen leaf. He tore away the wrapping. Underneath was a plain ivory box. When he opened the lid, the last piece of his performance crumbled. Inside sat one silver house key, polished and newly cut, resting on velvet lining. Beside it lay a folded sheet of thick cream paper. Maurice frowned, confused. He opened the paper. His eyes scanned the first line, then slowed. His jaw tightened. His hands began to shake. The letter was simple, formal and final. Petition for dissolution of marriage due to long-term deceit and violation of marital trust. Effective immediately. All joint accounts, vehicles, and real estate access revoked per verified sole ownership documentation. His breath hitched. He stared at the page as if it were written in an unfamiliar language. Then he looked at the key, the one that no longer matched any lock on my property. Guests stared, unsure whether to gasp or remain silent. Serena stood beside me, chest rising and falling slowly, her hand finding mine again. No sympathy, only fierce readiness. Marshall, his second woman, leaned closer, eyes darting over the bold print. Her carefully painted lips tightened. "Maurice, what is that?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His face had drained of color, leaving him a hollow version of the proud man from 5 minutes earlier. When he finally lifted his head and looked at me, the only remaining expression was fear, not of losing me, but of losing the life he'd lived off me. He opened his mouth. No words came out, just a faint wheeze. I held his gaze with a quietness sharper than any anger. Decades of held breath, swallowed pride, silenced frustration. All of it had evaporated. There was no rage left. No grief. No longing. Only clarity. Cold, clean, absolute. When I finally turned away, Maurice instinctively reached out a hand, but I stepped past him, as effortlessly as stepping around a fallen branch on a path. Serena felt my shift and straightened, her own spine lengthening. Talia stood rigid across the yard, torn between disbelief and guilt. Conversation around us had stopped entirely. Not a whisper. Not a breath. Even the cicadas quieted,
as if the world itself held still to witness this rupture. "Serena," I murmured. "Yes, Ma. It's time." And just like that, we left the cluster of frozen faces behind us. The grass parted as we walked toward the house, our steps measured and unhurried. Guests moved out of our path like water sliding away from the bow of a ship. I heard Maurice call my name, voice cracking like a frayed rope. I didn't look back. His voice had no weight anymore. No authority. No power. Inside the house, I paused near the doorway and looked out toward the crowd. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my tone polite, firm, and final. "The gathering is over. Please help yourselves to the last of the cobbler and be on your way." I shut the porch door gently. Not a slam, not a dramatic gesture. Just closure. The yard erupted into hurried whispers and shuffling feet. The exodus began. People couldn't get to their cars fast enough. In 10 minutes, the celebration of my 71st year had dissolved into abandoned cups, wrinkled napkins, wilting flowers, and crushed blades of grass. When the dust settled, Maurice dragged Marshall and her children toward the gate, his steps jerky and wild. His face had twisted from shock into something darker, rage tainted with humiliation. He had never imagined a world where he wasn't in control. Now he was nothing but a trespasser outside my own home. Serena hugged me, her arms strong around my shoulders. "You okay, Ma?" "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be," I whispered, brushing her hair back. "Let's clean." And so we did. We cleared dishes, folded linens, washed crystal glasses that had kissed the lips of people who judged me moments earlier. Every movement was steady, grounding, cleansing. With each glass rinsed, I felt a thread of my old life snap free. With each plate dried, the weight of half a century eased. By the time we were done, the house was quiet, my kind of quiet, the kind that breathes. We sipped mint tea on the porch as stars pricked the night sky. Then my phone vibrated. Morris's name flashed across the screen. Serena's jaw hardened. "We can ignore it," she offered. "No," I said. "Put it on speaker." She pressed the button. His voice burst through the speaker, raw and venomous. "Riva, have you lost your damn mind? You embarrass me in front of my people." "Me. Do you think this little tantrum will stand? My cards are declined. I can't even book a room. Fix it. Call the bank. Undo this mess before dawn, or you'll regret it. I swear." He kept screaming. In the background, Marshall's voice trembled, trying to calm him. The message ended abruptly. Serena looked at me, waiting to see if I would fall apart. Instead, I took another sip of tea. "Baby," I said, "they still believe I acted out of emotion. They think I'll reverse everything after a night of sleep." Serena nodded slowly. "But they don't understand." I continued. "This wasn't a reaction. This was an ending. A year in the making." The words settled between us like stone. I placed my cup on the table. "Tomorrow morning," I said quietly, "we meet my attorney. And I want you with me." Serena squeezed my hand. And for the first time since sunrise, I felt not just relief. I felt rebirth. The next morning, the drive into Charleston was wrapped in a strange kind of stillness. Serena gripped the steering wheel, jaw set, eyes forward. She wasn't afraid, but she was bracing herself because she knew what today meant. I stared out the window as the marshland rolled past. Heron feathers ruffled in the breeze, sunlight blinking across the water. The world looked unchanged, yet everything inside me had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Maurice still believed all this was a misunderstanding, a dramatic spat, a moment of shock that would melt away once he talked sense into me. He didn't know I had spent an entire year preparing for this moment, one cold step at a time. When we arrived at Attorney Reginald Pierce's office, an old brick building near Calhoun Street, I felt none of the trembling I once feared. The air smelled of cedar polish and old books. Pierce, a tall, composed man in his late 60s, greeted us with a firm nod. He had once handled estate matters for my father, which is why I trusted him. He led us to a long oak table and folded his hands.
Mrs. Holloway, he began, my maiden name, the one I'd reclaimed. Everything we discussed earlier has been executed. Financial accounts are secured, property access is locked, and the legal freeze on assets is active. Serena sat upright, shoulders tightening. Pierce's gaze sharpened. But there is something else we need to address. He opened a slim leather folder and slid several sheets toward me. My pulse remained steady. It was as if my body already knew what was inside. This, he said softly, is a report your husband filed nearly 2 months ago. A petition requesting a psychiatric evaluation of you. Serena inhaled sharply. Her hand found mine under the table, gripping hard. I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. I simply stared at the first page. The words looked almost unreal. Petition for mandatory mental competency assessment filed by Maurice Holloway. Purpose: establish guardianship and full control over estate and personal affairs. My fingers moved over the pages, slow, deliberate. Frequent forgetfulness. Disoriented behavior. Confusion between common household items. Social withdrawal. Talking to plants. A decline in judgment. Signs of cognitive instability. He had turned my laughter, my moments of tiredness, my peaceful hours in the garden, into a clinical accusation. He had twisted my humanity into a weapon. I read each fabricated symptom without emotion. It was not sadness. It was recognition. It was the moment you finally see a person without the mask you once helped them tie on. Pierce cleared his throat gently. Mrs. Holloway, this is not the first document in such cases. This is the first step toward declaring a spouse legally incompetent. After this, he would have pursued guardianship, which means he would have taken control of everything you own. Serena pressed her lips together, trembling with anger. Mamra, she whispered, he tried to erase you. No, I said calmly. He tried to erase my independence. And he believed I wouldn't notice. Pierce continued, voice cool and precise. He also listed your garden time as concerning isolation. He cited misplaced keys as progressive memory decline. He wrote that you often confused conversations or forgot recent events. I remembered each moment clearly. The day I mislaid my glasses on top of my head. The time I put salt in the sugar jar and caught it a minute later. The afternoon I spent pruning jasmine while humming to myself. Ordinary things. Human things. Processed into a weaponized script. The last small ember of anything resembling affection froze inside my chest, solid, final. Pierce looked at me respectfully. What we're dealing with is not simple betrayal, he said quietly. This was premeditated financial displacement. Had your documentation and estate setup not been airtight, he would have succeeded. I breathed out slowly. The picture, I said, is clear. Serena wiped her cheek, furious tears slipping out despite her restraint. Pierce closed the folder. For your security, we will escalate protective orders and asset separation immediately. Nothing moves without your signature. He placed a second envelope on the table. This, he said, is the next phase. That afternoon, Charleston hummed outside the windows as we drove home. Tourists wandered the sidewalks, carrying sweetgrass baskets and gelato cups. Joggers passed the seawall. Life kept moving, none of it aware of the quiet war unfolding inside my family. I thought of Maurice at that moment. His confusion, his rage, his disbelief. He'd built a life on my silence, so long that he mistook it for weakness. He forgot who I was before I became his foundation. Before we reached the house, Pierce's office had already dispatched legal couriers across the city. By the time Maurice finished his late breakfast in whatever hotel he found last night, a man in a suit would have walked up to him and handed him an envelope thicker than a family Bible. Inside, not just divorce filings, not just asset freezes, but a court mandate. He could not step onto any property in my name. He could not contact me except through attorneys. He had no legal claim to the house, condo, savings, or vehicle. Every ounce of power he believed he possessed evaporated in a single morning. I imagined him reading the papers, the way his face would flush, then drain, then twist. I imagined Marshall standing beside him, her confidence melting into fear. Because that's what happens when a person convinces themselves they are indispensable. They forget who actually carried the weight. We returned home as the locksmith worked quietly on the gate. New bolts, new plates, new locks. The clang of metal echoed through the yard, each strike a small liberation. For the first time in years, I stood on my porch and felt no burden on my shoulders. No weight, no fog, no invisible leash tied to someone else's needs. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. The restoration of a life I had misplaced somewhere between sacrifices and silence. For the first time, I chose myself. And I didn't apologize for it. 2 days after the paperwork hit him like a storm, Maurice and Marshall made their next move. The last, desperate kind people make when they're drowning. That afternoon, Serena found me on the porch sipping hibiscus tea. "Ma," she said, lowering her voice. "Talia called. She's crying. Daddy's at her place. They're trying to pull the whole family together tonight." I nodded slowly. Of course they were. They wanted witnesses, sympathy, an audience. They wanted to turn my clarity into madness, and their plotting into concern. "Tell her we'll be there," I said. Serena blinked, surprised but trusting. She didn't know yet that the truth I held would end everything. Talia's townhouse was pulsing with tension when we arrived. Curtains drawn, voices low, the kind of atmosphere heavy with rehearsed narratives. Inside the living room sat an entire circle of relatives. Morris's brother, Elliot, stern and uneasy. Elliot's wife, Marlene, clutching a tissue. Cousins whispering behind clenched jaws. Talia pacing nervously. And at the center, on the largest sofa, sat Maurice and Marshall. Maurice hunched forward, a picture of defeated sorrow. Marshall dabbed her eyes, the perfect portrait of a suffering companion. Serena and I entered with quiet composure. Maurice stood slowly and faced the room. "Family," he began in a trembling voice he practiced far too well. "I brought you here because something terrible is happening to my wife, and I don't know how to help her." Theatrical pause. She's been confused. She forgets conversations. She hides things. She's changed. And Serena is taking advantage, turning her against us, isolating her, twisting everything. Marlene gasped. Someone muttered, "Lord have mercy." Maurice pressed a shaking hand to his chest. She froze my accounts, took the car, locked me out of the home I built. She's pushing me into the street. This isn't my Riva. Something is wrong. He looked straight at me then, eyes glistening with manufactured grief. "Baby, we just want to help you." For a man who plotted to strip me of my mind, he certainly played the loving husband well. When he finished, the room held its breath. Now came their second act. Marshall lifted her face, voice trembling. "Please understand, we're not here to fight. We're here because we care. Riva has been fragile lately. Lost. Confused. And Serena, she's using it to gain control of everything." She pressed a hand to her heart. "It breaks us to see a mother and daughter destroying a family for money." The lie was so polished it could have won awards. The relatives nodded, uneasy but sympathetic. Elliot frowned, glancing between us, clearly unsure whom to believe. The stage was set. The script was ready. They expected pleading, denial, hysteria. Instead, Serena reached into her handbag. Her movements calm, unhurried, deadly precise. She placed a folder on the coffee table. A quiet click as paper met wood. Every eye snapped to it. "This," Serena said softly, "is the petition my father filed 2 months ago to have my mother declared mentally unfit." Silence collapsed over the room. Elliot leaned forward, took the first document, and read. His face shifted, from confusion to disbelief to revulsion. Marlene snatched the page next and put on her glasses with trembling hands. Maurice stepped forward, voice cracking. That's not what you think." But Serena wasn't finished. She took out a small digital recorder and placed it beside the folder. "And this," she said, "is the recording I made when he thought no one could hear him." Maurice froze. Marshall's hands turned stiff, claw-like on her skirt. Serena pressed play. His voice poured into the room. Cold, calculating, cruel. Make sure to tell the doctor she loses her glasses 3 times a day. Say she sits in the garden all afternoon. Withdrawn, don't overdo it. Keep it consistent. We need a believable decline. A pause. A lighter flicked. Then Marshall's voice. Are you sure this will work? It's taking too long. Morris's reply followed, dripping with arrogance. Just a little longer. When it's done, all of her property will finally be ours. The woman's losing it. Time to pluck the golden goose. The room didn't move. Even the air held its breath. Maurice lunged forward. That recording is manipulated. Serena, you. Enough, Elliot said, rising to his feet. His voice shook, not from fear, but fury. You tried to declare your wife incompetent after living off her for half your life? His gaze was cold, hard, final. You are no brother of mine. He took Marlene's hand, and the two walked out without another word. One by one, relatives rose and followed, refusing to look at Maurice or Marshall. The carefully built illusion collapsed in seconds. Talia sat in the corner, crying silently, her world splintering. Maurice stood frozen, mouth opening and closing uselessly. Marshall's hands trembled violently in her lap. Serena and I rose. Without dramatic speeches. Without theatrics. Just dignity. We walked to the door. At the threshold, I paused. Not for him, but for myself. Then I stepped out into the night. The door shut behind us, softly, almost gently, ending 50 years of performance. The evening air was cool, clean, full of space. We walked toward Serena's car without speaking. We didn't need words. Everything was done. Everything was revealed. The truth had set itself on the table for all to see, and the people who once believed Maurice now saw him with new eyes, clear eyes. As Serena drove through the quiet Charleston streets, something inside me loosened. A knot that had been tied for half a century simply unwound. There was no triumph. No revenge. Only release. Quiet, deep, irrevocable release. By the next morning, there were no calls, no begging, no threats, no apologies. Their world had swallowed itself whole, and we were finally free of it. 6 months passed like a long exhale, slow, steady, cleansing. My new condo sat high on the 15th floor of a modern building overlooking Charleston's West Side district. The windows faced the coast, and each evening the sun sank behind the skyline in colors so rich, they looked painted, soft rose, gold, blood orange. There was no weight in the walls. No heavy furniture soaked in years of unspoken grief. No echoes of sacrifices disguised as love. Just light, air, space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to belong to myself. I sold the old house without hesitation. People thought I would cling to it, the garden I built, the rooms shaped by my hands, the memories embedded in every corner. But I felt no sorrow signing the papers. The buyer was a young engineer with twin boys. He walked through the garden, eyes bright, and said, "This place feels alive, like someone loved it." He was right. That home had a good spirit. It had simply grown tired of holding up the wrong lives. Letting it go was not a loss, it was liberation. My days became deliciously simple. On Wednesdays, I started attending a pottery studio downtown. I loved the feel of clay. Cool, pliable, obedient only when guided with patience. I didn't aim for perfect bowls or flawless vases. I let the clay take the shape it wanted. There was something healing about creating from earth, shaping something new from nothing. On Fridays, I walked along the waterfront and treated myself to fresh plum tea from a small black-owned cafe whose owner called me Miss Riva with a peaceful smile. And sometimes, I dressed up just to sit in the back row of the Charleston Performing Arts Hall. The first time I went back, they played a stirring arrangement of Coleridge Taylor's Violin Concerto. I closed my eyes and let the music pour through me. For years, I thought not becoming a renowned architect had been the great failure of my life. But sitting there, feeling my chest rise with each swell of the orchestra, I realized something. I no longer carried regret. I carried gratitude. I was finally experiencing the world on my own terms, not designing spaces for others, but inhabiting spaces for myself. That was enough. More than enough. Serena visited often. We shared jasmine tea on my balcony, watching boats glide across the water below. Her shoulders were no longer tense with worry over me. She knew I was not fragile. She knew I had simply been silent, too long. One afternoon, she brought me a gardenia plant. "So, you can start a new little garden here," she said shyly. "Now it sits on my windowsill, blooming white and fragrant. Small roots, fresh soil, a new beginning." Occasionally, rarely, I heard rumors that Maurice was living in a small rental out near Edisto Island, far from the polished life he once boasted about. That Marshall had packed her things and left him. That her children stopped answering his calls. That he tried borrowing money from acquaintances, but pride collided with reality, and no one trusted him anymore. I listened to these whispers like one listens to news from a distant country. Detached. Unmoved. Uninterested. Those people no longer existed in my world. They were characters from a book I had closed and placed on the highest shelf. I didn't hate them. Hate was too heavy to carry. I didn't feel revenge. Revenge burns you from the inside. What I felt was clarity. Clarity that I had finally stepped into the life meant for me, not the life shaped by someone else's needs. One morning, I woke before dawn, as always. I brewed Kenyan coffee and stepped out onto my balcony. The city below glowed softly. The streets hummed as people hurried to begin their day. I leaned on the railing, feeling the warm breeze touch my face. For 50 years, I believed I was the foundation, steady, reliable, giving support to everyone else. I believed that purpose meant holding up other people's lives. But now I understood the truth. A foundation is just one part of a home. And I am not a foundation. I am the entire structure, with floors full of stories, windows that open to possibility, and a roof that finally shelters me first. At 71, my life didn't end. It began. I took a long sip of coffee, breathing in the promise of a new day. The air tasted like freedom, and for the first time in decades, I heard myself. Thank you, truly, for staying with me through this journey. If this story touched you, if it stirred something quiet, something familiar, something brave inside your spirit, let me know. Tell me in the comments, which moment stayed with you the most? Was it the reveal? The justice? The quiet strength? Or the rebirth at the end? I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop your city, your state, or your country so we can meet in the comments like family. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next powerful life story. And if you'd like to support my work, you can send a super thanks. It truly helps me bring you more stories filled with depth, emotion, and truth. Your presence here means more than you know. Your support, your comments, your kindness, they keep these stories alive. Thank you for listening, thank you for sharing, and thank you for walking through this journey with me. Until next time, be strong, be gentle with yourself, and live authentically.